All right, this is AP Lit. We're back from spring break, and we're reviewing at least the first part of Heart of Darkness. Let's look at those questions. We may have gone over them, but I just want to kind of reorient you in reading the book. Question number one is, where does the story begin? And we talked about this. It begins on the Thames River, Thames. We pronounce it something that sounds like Thames, not Thames. But the Thames River, and so even the location of the first chapter, the location, Claire, even this location is significant because the book is about two rivers. It's the Thames River and the Congo River. The Thames River being in England, the Congo in Africa. It's also about two narrators. And we'll answer that second question. Who are the individuals on the yacht? There's a group of people on the yacht, Claire. They're on the yacht getting ready to sail, but they can't sail because the tide has not changed. And this is a book that you cannot over-symbolize. I think we do that sometimes. Teachers particularly have been, that is that. It's just a rock, Mr. Powell. It's nothing more than a rock. You might be right, but not in this book. If that rock, if you can figure out what that rock, or whatever it happens to be, in this case a river, means, you would be on the right track, because even the author admits this is that kind of book. He intended it to be, that almost everything can be symbolized. Now, I'm sure there's some things that can't, but within reason, almost everything you run into can be a symbol. And so, the question is, who are the individuals on the yacht? And only two of them matter, and really only one matters. So, do you remember what they were? I'm assuming you don't, but you might. Marlowe's the only one that's named, and he's also the second narrator. Conrad is not even named. We're calling him Conrad because we don't know what else to call him. He's the first narrator, probably not really Conrad at all, although Conrad did sail. He was a sailor. But we'll call him Conrad, but he's not named. And then there are three others, unnamed people. You remember they were? The director, the lawyer, and the accountant. It doesn't really matter who they are, but that's who they are. Those three. So you have one named and four unnamed characters on the boat, and it is nighttime or twilight, and that fits in, again, immediately it fits in with the title of the book. Because it's nighttime or twilight. I think we mentioned this. Twilight particularly, I learned this in driver's ed, it's the hardest time of day to drive. And I don't know statistically if more accidents happen at twilight. It could be because it's rush hour, which is more likely there would be more accidents. But it's the theme of the book being darkness and all that darkness entails. Evil, ignorance, inability to see. You literally can't see in the dark, but seeing is also talks of the idea of intelligence or understanding or knowledge. So it's appropriate that the book begins. In fact, the whole book takes place in the dark. I don't know how long they're sitting there, but it's still dark, I think, at the end of the book, as it was in the beginning of the book. And this is a frame story, so keep that in mind. You talk about structure. If you're ever asked anything about structure, the frame, the outer frame, like the frame of this board, that's Conrad. Conrad is narrating that frame, and they're on the Thames on a boat waiting for the tide to change, which is something else you could symbolize. You ever heard the expression, the tide has turned? It's not just about the ocean tide. What does it mean if you ever heard that expression, the tide is turning? What does that mean? It's getting better or worse, I guess. Usually you think of it as better, the tide. And it's certainly games. There's a point in a game where the tide, what's the word we use in sports? Like in the momentum. That's what they like to say in sports. The momentum changes. Well, they're literally on a boat waiting for the tide to change. So you could even symbolize that. That's what's going on at the beginning of the story. Look at number 3. I'm not going to go back and show this to you, but trust me, if you look through the second and third pages of the book, his description is all, over and over again, he uses language that points to the time of day that it is. Darkness and nighttime and twilight and gauzy. You can't see through something. It's like this gauzy, foggy, smoggy appearance. Please, that's a skill you've learned. You've learned to go through a passage, and if you see a word or words that are related, circle them so that you can literally see them. Don't wait for the second time to read the passage. You only have 40 minutes if it's a written essay that you have to write. You don't have but 40 minutes to write it. So the first time through, start looking for things. That's why I always say use your pencil. Don't just sit there and stare at it and read it. Use your pencil, because you got to write a whole essay on this thing. So start circling words that, all kinds of things. I'm just thinking of all possibilities. All the, if it's asyndeton or polysyndeton, notice all the conjunctions or the lack of conjunction. Notice the lengths of sentences, how short sentences are. Make these notes, and then notice the images. All the words on those first 2 pages about the Thames River deal over and over and over about the end, about darkness, about night, over and over. So you got all this that he's putting together about the Thames. Number 4, Marlowe makes a statement. I don't know if we got there or not, but the first, I think it's the first thing that Marlowe says. I don't know what page it is in your book, but first thing he says is this statement: and this also has been one of the dark places on the earth. What do you think he means by that? It's nighttime, but that's not what he's talking about.
Like, he's saying that, like, Britain is, like, even though it's, like, home to, like, many great things, many, like, dark or bad things have happened in the past.
And he talks about the river and what went out the river, because the river was the highway to the sea. And England's one of the great seafarers. It was their, Britannia rules the waves, that whole idea. It was their navy that allowed them to become one of the greatest, as far as empires that ever existed. I mean, even the Romans just stretched from, England through France all the way, maybe, I don't know how far the Roman Empire stretched beyond the Middle East. But think about the English Empire. It is said of the British Empire that at this time, the Victorian time, that the sun never set on the British Empire. So think about it a minute. When you think of world, where do you see British influence other than just England? Where do you see places that have once been ruled by England?
Africa.
Yeah. Do you remember what part of Africa?
West Africa. Parts of it.
Yeah, maybe. I'm thinking especially north, like Egypt. Egypt was very strong, and then the tip of Africa, South Africa, the Dutch are there too. Where else do you think of the British? Yeah.
Australia, right?
Absolutely. New Zealand and Australia. Where else? Yeah.
America?
Of course. Very good. But not South America. It was the Spanish who conquered South America, but and of course Canada. What about China? You ever thought of the influence of England and China? The Opium Wars, you've heard about that? China, they were very strong in China. Didn't someone mention India? For I don't know how long, for dozens of years, not hundreds, but from the Victorian period into the time of Mahatma Gandhi, the British, Winston Churchill was stationed in India. Back in the 50s and 40s, very popular to make movies. Rudyard Kipling wrote books about British troops in India. So that's what this book is about when he says England has also been a dark place. Who conquered England? There have been very few countries that conquer England. If you go to, if you'll skip 5 just a minute and go to number 8. Go to number 8. The Romans conquered England. And so England has been both a conqueror and one who conquered, and that's all a part of what this book is about. It's a book about countries conquering other countries. That's a kind of a dark thing that's happening in Ukraine right now. Nobody thinks that's a good thing. We don't admire that. And so the Romans did that once to England. Now England is currently, when the book is taking place, doing that to the world around them. So that's number 4. Look at number 5. The narrator, Conrad, says of Marlowe's stories, the meaning is not inside, but outside, enveloping the tale. I've never quite been sure what that means. But you know how you can look at something, and we do that. I'm asking you to do that for the test, the AP exam. You're going to have to do that. You have to go deep, right? We talk about deep, to get into it, to look between the lines, to analyze individual words. But sometimes you can get lost doing that. So what do you have to do sometimes if you're trying to figure out a problem or looking at something? What's a good thing? Just common sense tells you need to do it. You're doing your taxes. I hope you don't have to do taxes yet. Did you have to do taxes? You made a paycheck. I guess you did. Anyway, I started earning money when I was 16. But sometimes it's like that. If you ever work on taxes, I got to take a break. So what do? You step back, and suddenly it looks different. I've always done some of my best thinking just running, doing something completely unrelated to the thing that I'm working on, just getting away. That's kind of what he means here when he says that's where Marlowe's story, you sometimes have to step back and look at the big picture, which is what we're talking about here. This whole business about world conquest and the British Empire, all that's actually a part to help understand the darkness. We're going to read a story about that Kipling wrote that talks about this idea of the white man's burden. In fact, that's what he calls the story. And it was the idea that Europeans had the answers, and in order to liberate people in the world that weren't as advanced as they were, they would go into these places and supposedly like missionaries. And that's not. There were real missionaries, but that's not. You can imagine that's really not what's going on. They wanted to get in these countries to grab and take out what they could. All that's a part of this story. Look at number 6. I'm anticipating when you get here. Several of these, you're going to have to read for yourself. I'm going to give you the answer to some. Like number 6, according to Marlowe, how do sailors feel about the land and the sea? I'll tell you. Save you some time. He said, sailors are the most sedentary people on earth. What does it mean to be sedentary? Yeah.
You don't do much. You're not active.
And you stay in one spot, right? Did somebody else say? Yeah, you stay in one spot. You're sedentary. You just sit. Maybe you're doing a lot. I don't know that it means you're not doing a lot, but you're not going anywhere. You're not moving around. You're not traveling. How could sailors be the most sedentary people on earth? I mean, they're on a boat, a ship rather, sailing around the world. That by the very nature of being a sailor, aren't you the opposite of being sedentary? Like that's what you do every second of the day. You don't stop in the middle of the ocean and wait, unless you have to because there's no wind in those days. But what's the riddle of that? What's the paradox of sailors being the most sedentary people on earth? Yeah.
They stay on the boat.
That's exactly right. They never leave their home. They're always at home. And at the same time, they're always away from home. So I just think that's kind of the way this book is. It's one big paradox. It's one big kind of riddle. Good answer. Okay, look at number 7. We've answered that they're waiting for the... Notice we've answered these 7 questions. We've talked about these things, and we've only read 3 pages. 3 or 4 pages. That's what you get with this book. There's so much in it. It's in your book, I think it's fewer than 100 pages, is the actual story. Look at number 8. I described that. How were the English superior to the Romans? We'll do 8. We'll do through 10. But number 8. How did he describe the Romans on page 40? I'll anticipate that. Are y'all leaving? Good luck. Is it track? Soccer? All right, good luck. So, how did he describe the Romans? I'm going to tell you this. The Romans were like just regular people, and when they encountered, good luck everybody, when they encountered the wilderness of England, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? This wilderness, I mean, England's one of the most, one of the most civilized country on earth. He describes what that does to them. And it's the darkness and the wilderness what this story is about, is what that will do to an individual, is being in a world of darkness and a primitive kind of darkness. So we'll certainly see more of that. Look at number 9. It says the English were superior to Romans. We know the Romans conquered the world. The English conquered the world. And he says the difference is this: efficiency. According to Marlowe, the English are simply have been more efficient than the Romans were. The Romans just used a sledgehammer. The English, say, used a scalpel. You know, Romans just knocked everything down in their path. The English are surgically slicing it up. That's my analogy. They said that about the Germans. One of the most advanced cultures in history, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach. Remember, they also created Hitler. And they said that the Germans had perfected killing, and that the concentration camps were models of killing efficiency. They would use everything about the body of a dead Jewish man, woman, or child. The hair, everything, the clothes. They would recycle a human being to uses for the German army. And Nick had a really good point from second period this morning, or B period. He said that was the Holocaust is one of the reasons the Germans lost the war, because they were spending so much time trying to kill themselves, the Jews of Eastern Europe, that they didn't put enough effort and just focus onto winning a war. It's a good thing. But it reminds us that evil is inefficient. Evil is self-destructive. Ultimately, evil destroys itself. So if you're worried about the bad guys winning, they can't. It's not the way God created the world. He allows evil to exist, but after a while, he also knows that the very energy and material used for evil, because it's used for evil, will destroy itself. And let's look at that's number 9. Number 10 we won't read. It's kind of a long question, but I do want to, and we might have time to read just a little bit. I want to end with 2 things, which we get to about question 10. This name, and you'll find the name. I don't know what page this is. So look for this. I want to show you in advance where it is. It's about the 5th or 6th page in this first chapter. It starts with the paragraph, "I don't want to bother you much about what happened to me personally." Would you find that? Where is it? 42. That paragraph, I'm going to read, and I want you to circle something. "I don't want to bother you much about what happened to me personally. He began," this is Marlowe. And one interesting thing about the book, every now and then, Marlowe is talking page after page after page, and all of a sudden, the quotation marks end. And you see something without quotation marks. That means Conrad is talking, is writing. So every now and then, he backs out of Marlowe's story to remind everybody where they are on this boat in the Thames. And then he'll come back in, but he says, not about what happened to me personally. He began showing in this remark the weakness of many tellers of tales who seem so often unaware of what their audience would best like to hear. This is it. Yet to understand the effect of it on me, you ought to know how I got out there, what I saw, how I went up that river to the place where I first met the poor chap. If you'll underline that, that is a one sentence or even half a sentence summary of the entire book. You're on page 42, did you say? Okay, starting with, I don't want to bother you much about what happened. About halfway down it says, yet to understand the effect of it on me, you ought to know how I got out there, Africa, the Congo, what I saw when he got to the Congo, how I went up the river, the Congo River, to the place where I first met the poor chap, and that's the poor chap right there. The entire book is about that guy right there. And you don't meet him until about 20 pages from the end of the book. It's one of those books where the author holds you in suspense the entire time. You keep hearing more and more about Kurtz. Who is he? What is he? By the time you see him, as is inevitable, there's sometimes a, is that all? You know, it's kind of like it's first been built up, and then when you meet him, you may be slightly disappointed, and yet, you know, he in many ways, he's all the things they said about him. So this book is about that guy right there. This is the guy that, like you guys are going to do in about a year and a half, walk into, unless you go to even Liberty University, can probably be a dark place sometimes, you know, because you got dark people, you know, you got people that are in darkness, that are there. Just because it's a Christian school doesn't mean they're perfect or anything, but most of you aren't going to a Christian school. And you walk into a dark place, and what's it going to do to you? That's what this book is about. It's about this guy and this guy, Marlowe, going to a very dark place, and what did that dark place do to them? It does something to both. He even says it. He says, you have to understand the effect of it on me going to that dark place. It's not just any dark place, it's the heart of darkness. It's like the capital, the citadel of darkness. Wonder where that would be in the world or America if there were such a place. They call Las Vegas Sin City. You know, they're proud of it. That's part of their, you know. Because of that, I doubt if that's really the darkest place in America because it's too obvious. Wonder what the darkest place in America would be. The most evil place. Is there even such a place anywhere? Is that even possible for not everything to be concentrated there, but that like this would be the worst place you could possibly go? Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. That's kind of what this book is about. They go to the heart of darkness. And again, when you go off to a college campus, what's it going to do to you? Well, that's what this book is about. The other thing I wanted to point out is, and finally, is if you could tell me, because the book is partially about colonization and imperialism. Has Mrs. Roberts talked about imperialism? You don't remember? I know it's only been 2 weeks. How could you possibly forget? I'm joking. I imagine you could forget that. She talks about 5 or 6 kinds of imperialism. Has she talked about that? Like military conquest, colonization. There are also different kinds of ways one country can strip the resources, dominate the resources of another country. That's also what this book is about. And if you think of Africa, just to finish, I think it's useful. We already mentioned England. You think of Egypt, and maybe South Africa, because the English were in South Africa. They fought a war in South Africa. You ever heard of the Boer War? That was a war between the English, the British, Victorian era, this era, the book is written, and the Dutch, which were in South Africa. Afrikaners, that was a language. Yeah, I think it was a mix of Dutch and whatever was spoken in Africa. What other European countries do you associate with particular parts of Africa? Yeah.
France,
Yes. Which part of Africa?
Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
Ivory-
Now, is Ivory Coast North
West
Africa?
Africa.
It's also, I don't know about the Ivory Coast, but the north side, you ever seen the movie Casablanca? Ever heard of it? Okay, you gotta see, these are great movies. How about even, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, not the Raiders, but, well, that was World War II though. But anyway, Casablanca takes place in Casablanca, which is Morocco or North Africa. Have you ever heard of the French Foreign Legion? I was fascinated with that as a kid. It's literally a foreign legion. In other words, except for the officers, you cannot join the French Foreign Legion and be a French person. You have to be non-French. And they were stationed and developed for North Africa and all the deserts, the Sahara, and they put posts all over North Africa, and I guess they were fighting the locals. But the French, anything about the French Foreign Legion, it was a place, kind of almost a proverb. If you get in trouble anywhere in the world, and they're looking for you, the law's looking for you, get out of the country and join the French Foreign Legion. Like, that was the last resort of any criminal on earth if you wanted to avoid crime, because they wouldn't ask you any questions. They didn't care what you did. They wouldn't turn you in. They didn't ask any questions. You were in the French Foreign Legion. But that's North Africa. What other countries do you associate with Africa? We've mentioned Britain. We've mentioned France. How about the country of Ethiopia? What? How do you know that? That's true. I'm just curious. They did. Yeah, did the Italians win or lose? No, they lost. It was I guess who was the dictator of Italy was Mussolini, and he couldn't defeat the Ethiopians. And Haile Selassie, you ever heard that name? Haile Selassie. He was their emperor. He was also kind of a god. And Bob Marley. You ever heard of Bob Marley? He was into that. There was a whole religion that came out of this, but it was the Italians. What about the Germans? In watching the old Tarzan movies and things like that, they takes place during World War I. The Germans were in Central, I don't know where, but they were fighting the British. The Dutch were in South Africa. And finally, how about the Congo? That's where this book takes place. You know what European country dominated the Congo? It was Belgium, and it was called the Belgian Congo. Several years ago, we had and I cannot remember their names. They actually lived at one time with Mr. Greer, but they were from Congo, and we'll run across, when we were reading this book in class one day, talking about it, mentioned a city in the Congo. She raised her hand, he said, I was born there. She was born in a city that's mentioned in Heart of Darkness. It used to be called Leopoldville, after the king of Belgium, King Leopold, and now it has a more of an original name. Guys, bring your book. It's due Friday. You got to read it. I can't substitute, but it's this important. I think it would be useful. I'll study the words. I'll give you the data sheets tomorrow. You can start working on those. We will see you.
Thank you.